Hey there folks, welcome back to another video in this collapse video series, making games with Pygame Python using the Pygame module. In the last video we put together our grids. In the last few videos we put together our grid. We've managed to put in event handlers so that if the mouse moves, the cells then show which cells are in focus, and if we click on a cell, it then removes all of the related cells, or all of the connected cells then get removed from the screen. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to create a function or a method that's going to allow that once we've selected cells, the cells above it will drop down. And if we do clear an entire column, then all the codes to all the blocks to the right of it will then shift up to the left, shift up 1 or 2 blocks to the left. Right, let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to go to our, if I have it correct, give me 1 second. We want to go to our update method. So in our update method, we're going to call a method. We're just going to call it self.moveCells. Right, self.moveCells. We obviously don't have a moveCells method just yet. We need to create it. So we're going to create the moveCells method. We're going to do it just underneath our run method, just in between the input and run. So define moveCells. Just pass the argument self. Straightforward. Okay, we're going to go with a for I row in enumerate self.cells. For loop for j call in enumerate row. Okay. Then we're going to say if j is less than length of self.cells 0 minus 1. Okay, for consistency. All right, so if j is less than length. So basically, if j, so we're not in the last row or column. Okay. If self.cells I j plus 1 active is equal to false, we then want to go to self.cells I j plus 1 rectangle, because we want to the rectangle, and we're going to say self.cells I j rectangle. Okay, will then be equal to, okay, it's going to be a very long line, so let's just, oopsie, hang on a second. Sorry about that, give me 1 second. Where are we here? There. Okay. It's going to be equal. Let me just do it on one line so you can see what it is that I'm doing first. Self. So basically, we want these two cells to swap all of their information. Okay, it's very long for one line, so we're just going to put a backslash there and enter. So basically, we're this position cell and this cell are we're swapping positions between these two cells, right? And then we're going to go ahead and say self.cells I j plus 1 self.cells I j is going to be equal. We're doing the exact same thing. I don't know why I couldn't get it to work with, you would think that just copying it straightforward like this would make it copy across, but it didn't. The rectangle needs to be copied separately. I think the reason was if you just copy the entire dictionary across to each other, the rectangles don't actually change. You're just putting them in a different position of the list, but the image for the rectangle, for the image that's created, the rectangle of that image stays in the same place. which is not what we want. All right. Once we've got that little code, we're going to also do, so if j is equal to the len self dot cells 0 minus 1 and self dot cells I j active is equal to false, right? So if we're in the last row or last column, we then want to say for r row in enumerate self dot cells, for c cols in enumerate rows. Okay. If r is greater than I, right? Self dot cells r minus 1 c rectangle self dot cells r c rectangle is equal to, okay, I just want to copy this and just reverse the order. All right, this is to handle with the column. Self dot cells r minus 1 c self dot cells r c is equal to self dot, let's just copy it because it's much easier. Right. Okay, so we're calling this method every time we do the update. All right. So I think actually that should be a row. Before we carry on, I just want to see if we've got it running. If I hit that button, there we go. As you can see, if I click this purple cells here, the entire column drops down. Columns drop down. It's doing what it's supposed to. Let's see if we can get a full column by itself. We might be able to. So once I've clicked this red, this entire block here should shift over to the left. That is what we're looking for. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Okay. So while I was looking at this again, I realized that I have made a mistake, but it still works. And for the purposes of the game and the way it runs, it still works, so I'm not going to go ahead and change it. When you're working with images and you're working with grids, the image has a rectangle, which is the x and y coordinates, and the grid has the x and y, or basically your first list. Your first list is basically your rows, which would be your y coordinate, and then your second list would actually be your x coordinates. But the rectangle has the x in the front and the y as a second parameter argument. So the issue that I'm running into is, particularly in this game, is if you can picture it, when you view the actual game grid, oh, I've gone and opened the wrong screen. When you view the actual game grid as it's going like this, you've got this first, so you would have a row, and then a row, and then a row. So my first list would be a list of these cells, a list of these cells, a list of these cells. And then my nested list, my second list, my y coordinate, technically speaking, on the grid, would then be my columns, right? But in terms of the images of the squares or the tiles, the very first is the x, which is your columns, and then your y is actually your y coordinates on the y-axis. So what's happening now is, if you had to imagine this entire grid in the form of a grid printed to the screen, I would have blue, red, purple, yellow, green, yellow, yellow, red, yellow, yellow. So it's actually, it's transposed. So the image is transposed onto the screen currently. So here it looks like it's going in this direction, but actually in terms of the game logic in the background, it's actually going in this direction. I've been struggling with this for the last 3 videos, 3 projects I've made as well. I always get confused between the X and Y coordinates of an image and the X and Y on a grid. I'm working on it. I'm trying to get it better. I'm just making you aware of it. It can be a little tricky to get it right. And that's why on this one we're working with the J column in my moveCells method, where you would expect to be using the I. Where are we? That's why I'm using the J here. You would actually expect to be using the I, because this would be the rows for the items falling down, and the J would actually be the columns, the stuff going leftwards. So that's where I've got the two confused. It's working. I'm not going to fix it because I managed to get it to work by swapping my I and J's around. I'm not going to go ahead and fix it. The game's working, and it's still, we can still calculate the score and everything correctly, so there's no need. All right. So what we've done so far, we've built the game. The cells, if we select the cells drop down. The game, we actually, technically speaking, have a working game at the moment. The only problem is, as you clear the screen, when you get to the end of the game, there's no ending, there's no score. The game will just get to as far as you can go, and then it'll just carry on. You can't close it, nothing. So let's go ahead and go to the next step. Right, what we're going to do now is we're going to, I think we're going to include an info panel. A lot of most of the functions that are left now are basically utility functions, it's information and things like that. I think let's go ahead and create those. Or maybe we should leave that. We'll do all of that stuff in one video because they're all interconnected. I think we'll do them in one video. Let me just do one more thing. In this video, we're gonna include the colorblind images. Let's do that. So in order to do the colorblind images, we're going to need to perform a couple of activities. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to our setup utility functions under my create image. Oh, while we're busy with this, let's just change this back to view, appearance, presentation. There we go. Under my create image, we're going to define a function we're going to call createColorBlindImage, right? We're going to pass it a surface, we're going to pass it a number, and we're going to pass it a font, right? We're going to say new surf is going to be equal to surface.copy, and then text will be equal to font.render string num false, and then the color will be 0, 0, 0, which is black. Then the text rectangle, the image rectangle is going to be text.getRect, and the center will be equal to center equal new surf.getWidth, 2, new surf.getHeight. Alright, get height. Okay, and we're going to go new surf.lit text and text rect. Right, and then we're going to return that new surface. Return new surf. Okay. Then we're going to go back up to our no, not up. We're going to go down to where we created our cells. I created our cell grid. And in our cell dictionary, so the line.append dictionary, in our createCellGrid, under large image, right? We're then going to include color blind. What are you doing? Come on. image, right? And that's going to be main game dot cell images. Oh goodness, numbers value -1, right? Below that's going to be large color blind image. It's going to be Pygame dot transform dot scale main game dot cell images numbers. Main game dot cell images numbers value -1, and we scale it for 45, right? Comma there. That's updating our createCellGrid. So that updates CellGrid. We're going to go up to our main game class. Up in our main game class, right? We have self.cellImages under setup. Right. We then want to have self.cellImages numbers. And that'll also be a list comprehension. It's going to be create colorblind image, right? Colorblind image. And we're going to pass it surf num +1 self.font attribute we haven't created yet. Self.font for num surf enumerate self.cell images. Okay, just before I explain what's going on there, let's just quickly create the self.font over here. Self.font is equal to pygame.font.sysfont. We use Arial. 22 is a good size. True. Okay. So what we're doing now in this list comprehension is we're taking our self.cell images. So here we've already got 6 images. So we're going to take each of 5 images. We're going to take each of those 5 images and we're going to run it through the createColorBlind image method of function we've created, which basically takes that image and it's going to add text to it, which will be text 1, text 2, text 3, text 4, text 5. Okay, and it returns back into the cell images numbers variable or attribute of my main game class. Okay, so now that we've created that, we're going to come down to our, we need to create a self.colorblind button. So we need to create a button so that we can switch between regular images and colorblind images, or the number buttons. So up in my game settings, I'm going to create a variable or a list called self.buttons. It's going to be a list, right? Self.buttons, and we're going to create a button now. Here in my setup, so here in my setup, we're going to create a button, self.colorBlind button to be equal to infoPanel, right? Which is a function that we need to create quickly. So let's go create that function under my game settings. Game utilities. Under my check valid selection, right? At the bottom here, we're going to say define infoPanel. Okay, we need to pass it a message. We're going to pass it a BG color, text color, size, which we're going to give a default value as 150 by 40. Okay. So surf is going to be equal to Pygame.surface size. Surf.fill will be color. Okay. Will be BG color. Okay. The font is going to be equal to Pygame.font.sysFont. We'll use Arial. We're going to give it a size 22. True. Text will be equal to font.render message false and text color. Right. Text rect will be equal to text.get rect mid left equals 5. Surf.get height 2. Right. Then we're going to take this text image and we're going to blitz it onto the surface. Text rect. Okay, and then we're going to return that surface. Right, so we have an info panel. Okay, we go back up to our main game class. Back up to the main game class. Where is it? There we go. Our info panel. Back up to our info panel. Right. Self.colorblind button. We want to pass color, which is the text, the message we want to put into it. We're going to give it a color of gray. Text is going to be black. And then we want to change the size. We don't want the default size. We want to change the size to 60 by 40. Right, colorblind image. Underneath in my button setup section, we're going to go self.colorblind button rect equal to self.colorblind button dot get rect. And we'll say top left be equal to 200 by 0. Okay. And then we also want to include this button to our self.buttons. Into self.colorblind button rect. So we're going to include the rectangle of the button to our self.buttons list. Last thing we want to do is in our input section. Okay, in our input section, if event.button is equal to 1, if not so, if row, okay, there. Over there we want to say if self.buttons 0, because there's nothing else in the button, self.buttons 0 dot collide point Pygame.mouse dot get pos. Right. So basically, if we're clicking on that button, because there's only one button in this button list so far, if the mouse is clicked on that button, if self.colorblind is equal to false. So if self.colorblind is equal to false, else I'm going to switch it to self.colorblind is equal to true. Okay, so we don't have a self.colorblind attribute at the moment, so we just quickly need to create that. So in my game loop, main game class, under my game loop, self.run.true. Under my self.run, we're going to say self.colorblind. We're going to say false. Okay. Then in my self.image, we just want to make a change here. We want to say if self.colorblind is equal to false, else. I'm going to say else. We want it to be the color blind image. Remember, this data is already stored in the cell grid as it's when it was created. Color blind is equal to false. Else it must be large color blind image. Okay. In my update method, there's nothing there in the update that needs to be changed. Nothing in the update as far as I'm aware. Oh yes, we do need to include in the update method as well. Why exactly? Hang on. And we're not drawing the button to the screen yet. Okay. Let's go to our draw method. Our draw method. Our draw method. Above this one, we're going to draw self.infoPanels. InfoPanels is a method that we need to create within. There we go. So, just above my draw method, define infoPanels. Okay. In our infoPanel, we're going to draw self.GameScreen.lit self.colorBlindButton self.colorBlindButton rect. Okay, let's try this again. There we have a button right there. If we click it, nothing happens at the moment. Oh, of course. Okay, so it's not working because when we initialize the main game, it's already initialized everything at the normal image. But it doesn't update when we click the button. So what we need to do is in our update method, where is our update method? There, we actually need to, so we actually need to include this in our update method. Okay, if we run it now, we should see it. If we hit the color button, it works, but yo, what happened there? Okay, so the text is obviously in the wrong position. So let's fix that quickly. So what we actually need to do is now new surf.getHeight. So what happened is when we create our colorblind image, now text rectangles, our get height. So we're getting the height of the surface, but we're not actually halving it, which is something we needed to do. So if we run the game now, we click the color button, there we go. So the center of our number is now appearing in the center of the square. We hit the color button again, the numbers go away. I'm going to do it one more time. It'll grow old soon, I promise. So we have, technically speaking, a functional game. I like the numbers. It's much easier for me to play. But yeah. I think there's one, maybe two more videos, but I think we can squeeze it into one video. It's basically, in the next video, we need to include the info panel and the in-game states. Right. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you managed to follow along and find it interesting. And I will see you in the next one. Cheers for now.